Wayne Doorband here for the bi-weekly NTP CEED webinar huddle that we hold here at our Northern Colorado headquarters in Loveland, Colorado, both live here at our site and also going out over the web to those of you that are watching. Enjoy what we have for you today. Hi, Wayne Doorband, live here from Northern Colorado. How's everybody doing today? I don't have a camera to show you, but we're actually having a little bit of snow today. It's actually very nice for the last several days, but today, a little bit like winter. Anyway, we're going to have real fun today. We're going to do several different things. We're calling this the best of. So we're going to take a webinar that we did almost 3 years ago with Dr. James Kunstler, who is a famous speaker, author, very well known for his disruptive thought. So we're going to replay a video we did with him a couple of years ago, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. We're also going to show a few things from our recent move here to the ranch, where we've taken some really cool videos that Brian has shown, so we're going to show those. And I'm also going to talk a little bit to start out here today about our new events that we're doing, a couple of them actually. One of them is going to involve a new partnership that we've created with a group around the world, really, primarily based in Pakistan, called Implatur. And Implatur is the Latin word for implement or results. And our slogan is, our work, your success. So what we're going to do at Implatur is provide all-in-one solutions for businesses that are looking to take new products to market, to take existing products, to create celebrity status for themselves, that want to really make a mark on their particular industries. And the very first project we're going to start with is one that's in the financial area, specifically real estate. And we're working with an amazing man who's had a track record of 15 years in the real estate industry. And it's called Keyhole Academy, and it's going to eventually become Keyhole University, where we're going to be presenting courses, doing instruction, having live events, doing summits, and other sorts of things in the marketing area in a partnership with Keyhole Academy, where Implatur is the entity that's putting together all the solutions for that. So you'll hear more about that with time. But we've got something that we're doing right now that I really would like you to hear about in just a second. We always get a huge number of additional people that watch our webinars as replays, but we really like you to be live. So if you're watching this as a replay, come to our next one live. Remember, we do this every Monday and Wednesday, the first and third Mondays and Wednesdays, of the month, every month. And we're just having our first anniversary of a full year. Actually, I think it's this webinar is our 1 year anniversary. We actually did it a little later in the month, last month, just the way the days fit. But this is the 1 year anniversary. I'm going to try something here. I'm going to share a screen with you. As you can see, this is an announcement for the International Online Alpaca Summit. And it is an amazing new event that we are promoting through Implatur that is, just as it sounds, an online event. And it's where you're going to be able to register for free, and you can go a lot of different places on the site. I'll just click here and show you one. If you click Get Started, all you need to do is just put your email address and name in there, and you'll become registered. This is free. This is a free event for anyone that would like to register for it. And as you can see, it lasts between February and April, and there's really 3 parts of it. And I'm going to scroll down the page here and just show you a little bit about the 3 parts. And you'll see that there is an exhibit hall where literally you can come and visit exhibitors, and we have a number of exhibitors already, and we're going to get hundreds more. And you can see their products and all the different things they have. There's going to be a live event where we're at an event called the Futurity for 2 days, where we're filming from there, and we're going to have featured speakers, 16 of them, some of the top speakers in the alpaca industry. which, as you know, we're involved in one way or another. Again, lots of places on this page that you're going to be able to see where you can actually put your name in and get a free registration and then be able to join us, much like you join us and you watch these webinars. So enough for that. I'm going to go back away from this and to my other view here. We're probably going to move on to the next thing we're going to do today. Before we have Dr. Kunzler on, is had some requests to show just a little bit about what we've done out here at the ranch, and I think they're queuing up a video now. Actually, we have 3 little short videos we'll show you just kind of stuff that's been going on here at the ranch. Why don't we go ahead and play those right now? He is so dense. That's his biggest, but look at these micro bundles. You will not see anybody else. He's beige, I mean, but he looks white. But look at that. That's very unusual. You do not see that. Well, that's what it looks like there. Okay, that's the good spot, all right? Now, it's just the same right here. And it's just the same. They really hate the rear. Back here. It's actually better. This is his best. I think this is where he's the best, back here, actually. door. I want you guys to step in and you can be looking in a little bit. And you're going to see a subtle difference between these two generations. This is the second generation. We're going to look at the first generation in just a couple of minutes here. This one, two major changes. One, we put more of whatever this stuff is called. I always forget the name, covering up our insulation so that It's you use it in bathrooms. It's actually a kind of a composite metal plastic. It's a weird, but it's used in bathrooms and commercial and so on. Second is that instead of collecting in troughs, which is what I'm sure you saw, and you're going to see it in the other one, which are below each row, we put these curtains down, and when we water, the water just goes down the front of the curtain and just collects in this bottom tray. It gave us about 4 inches on each side more area to be able to work in it. So we would soak the seeds right over here in this. We would harvest. We have a rack system that I will show you. We've got that we put right over here. We'd harvest. We put right into the rack. We could put 20 trays in a rack. So there's 60 we'd harvest in a day. And so we'd have 20 trays. Then we just move that rack out, and then we just fill it again. We have multiple racks. This would have been with a ramp coming off of this, going down to the ground where we had it that we were operating. Again, with over 2.5 years of production, we'd averaged about 1,000 to 1,200 pounds a day. We built our own trays. So our first generation, these we bought at the Container Store. They're boot trays. And we designed our own. We built our own extrusion system, vacuum injection system. To build these, we went through a whole bunch of iterations. And then we went with slots at the end rather than holes. And that was just more labor intensive, quite honestly. This was just easier to do. This actually was done in the vacuum injection. So this was, and we just have to take it, we just cut the bottom and we cut that out. And these are 2.5 years old, and some of them would start to do this, break, but most of them, that's even a little unusual.
Do you sell them?
We've had a lot of people ask us to, and no, we're not manufacturing. I mean, I think we could easily get and teach someone how to build the unit that we have, but no, we haven't sold them. So everything can be done inside here. So in the dead of winter, you just close this door and you're working in here. And when you're done harvesting, you start to plant from over here. You can clean. We'd set up a cleaning unit on one side or the other and do everything inside. This is our first generation fodder production. To give you a contrast.
What kind of seed do you use?
We've used everything. I mean, sunflower, alfalfa, barley, wheat, oats. We settled on barley and wheat, and we really didn't find a whole lot of nutritional difference or animal consumption difference between barley and wheat, so we would hedge. And whatever we could get the cheapest, because we bought 10 tons at a time typically. This one you can quickly see just what's different about it. First, we didn't put that board on the outside, which, by the way, adds a ton in terms of its insulative value. And then it's got this system instead. Otherwise, they're identical. We have the humidifier in the front of this one, where we found it was better to be back in the back. We have fans that blow the air this way in both of them. This one we're actually going to totally abandon. We're going to take all of this out, and we're going to turn this into another aquaponic production kind of a system. The units will be stacked, and they're 4 feet each. So they need to be off the floor a little because of the trays. So they'll almost go to the ceiling in here. But you're going to see how much taller. Kind of remember that one. You're going to see how much taller this one is. This one doesn't have, so we can go in through one door. Feel how much taller they are? You can just feel the difference being in there. And so those rotating gardens will be on top of each other, with one of them being almost to the ceiling. They're 4 feet wide, so they'll go out probably to about where my arms are here, and there'll be a walkway over on this side or which other side. And then there'll be the same air conditioning type of equipment. Not what's in those. The company that's helping us in Michigan has got a more commercial grade. It'll be in the back, just like they are in the microgreens units. All the air conditioning, and then we'll have airflow fans through this way, coming out through, and then we'll have doors. These are going to be refrigerated containers that we're using for that. So they have insulation on them that is about this thick, and they look like they're hospital grade inside, totally white, just look gorgeous inside. So, just a little bit of showing you what's going on here at the ranch. And we had another video we were going to queue up, but decided we really want to get to Dr. Kunstler. This guy is really something. So this is a replay of a webinar that we did a couple of years ago. It's actually announced by somebody who's moved on to amazingly, her career has just skyrocketed. And you're going to hear her talk, and that's Rachel. And she will be introducing Dr. Kunstler. She actually is going to give some introduction that you're not going to hear. And I think we're going to move right into the video.
I'm going to go ahead and introduce tonight's guest. I'm really pleased to be bringing James Howard Kunstler to this webinar series. His book, The Long Emergency, had a huge impact on me and my thinking in the direction of my life when I read it several years ago. And it's really exciting for him to be here. I do feel like I'm hosting a celebrity in a sense. I'm sure that'll make him chuckle. But without further ado, Jim, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
A pleasure to be here. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
All righty. Well, this talk is going to take place in a couple of different pieces. I want to talk about the macro situation, what's going on in the world and the country and the background of what I call the long emergency. So I want to talk about the macro situation, then I want to talk about some of the particulars of how we're going to actually inhabit the landscape of North America. And this has been a preoccupation of mine for a long time. In fact, it got me into the whole subject of the long emergency because I started writing about the fiasco of suburbia. And you couldn't reflect on that very long before you realized that it raised the question of how were we going to run it in the years ahead. And I think the answer clearly is we're not going to run it. We've got to make other arrangements. And so I want to talk about what those other arrangements are for inhabiting the landscape, and in particular the urban human habitat, because I think we're going to be returning to traditional ways of inhabiting the terrain of North America. So here we have the current situation. The outstanding feature of the current situation is that we as a people, as a nation, cannot construct a coherent narrative or consensus about what is happening to us and what we're going to do about it. And so as a result, we have a lot of wishful thinking and fantasies and silliness, and we're not really preparing for what is ahead or taking care of our business in an intelligent way. Next slide, Ariel. Can you change the PowerPoint? Can we click forward?
You know what? I did. It's being a little sticky tonight. So let me see if I can get this going. Okay, there we go.
Thanks. You know, in the Long Emergency, which was published in 2005, I was mainly concerned at the time with the peak oil predicament and the material resources issue about how we were going to get enough stuff to keep on, running Walt Disney World and suburbia. But something happened in between. We had in between then and now, we had the financial collapse. And what that demonstrated, and what is still going on, is that we are running our financial system on accounting fraud. And it is causing us an enormous problem. The problems that we have with oil and with the prospects of being able to run our society and get the energy we need are now being, those problems are being amplified by what is developing as a scarcity of money and an impairment of capital formation and of all of the operations of banking. And what it really means is that the money that we were hoping would be there to build the next economy and take our society forward to whatever the post-oil society was going to be, the money will not be there to help us do it. And so it's going to be even more difficult to get to our destination than we thought it was in 2005. Next slide, please. I think that what's going on is that when you run a banking system on accounting fraud, you basically are disturbing all of the price discovery mechanisms of markets and the interest rate discovery mechanisms. And when this starts to happen, money starts to vanish into a black hole from which it will never emerge again. And that is really what is happening now, and it's the reason that the Federal Reserve is so frantically printing money and engaging in Operation Twist and other interventions and manipulations of the financial system. It is probably only compounding the trouble that we're in by adding layers of hyper complexity, and in particular, hyper complex fraud on top of the fraud that already exists. So what this means is that our prospects for having the necessary money to go forward is even poorer. And it's important to understand that capitalism is not an ideology. Capitalism is a set of laws governing the behavior of surplus wealth. And when we talk about capital, we're really talking about surplus wealth and the stuff that we've accumulated from our previous activities that generate real wealth. And one of the enormous problems is we've replaced a wealth-generating economy of producing real things of value with an economy of financialization and largely fraud and swindling. And this is leading to what will now be a compressive contraction of economic activity in all of the advanced nations. It's not a depression, it's not a recession, it is a more or less permanent contraction that will go ahead as far ahead as we can see. Next. I want to talk a little about energy. The peak oil story is still for real, despite the tremendous propaganda campaign to persuade America that we have 100 years of shale gas, or that all of our problems will be solved by fracking or shale oil and getting tar sand byproducts. The fact of the matter is, all of these unconventional kinds of oil are much more expensive, much more difficult to produce, and the peak oil problem has not gone away at all. Next. The key to understanding the alternative energy situation is simply this. We're going to be disappointed by what these things can do for us. We are not going to run Walmart, Walt Disney World, the interstate highway system, suburbia, the U.S. military, and the server farms on any combination of solar, wind, algae secretions, used French fried potato oil, or other alternative energy sources. I don't want to be misunderstood. We're going to use everything that we can. I'm not against alternative energy, but our idea about what we can do with it is unfortunately too grandiose. And the bottom line is, we're not going to run all this stuff by other means. We're going to have to make other arrangements for everyday life in America, and indeed in the developed world. Next. I think you can state categorically that when a society is in trouble economically and socially and psychologically as a group, that the delusional thinking increases in direct proportion to the distress. And there are a lot of delusional fantasy ideas out there. I get letters every week from cranks who try to persuade me that the Earth has a creamy nougat center of petroleum, and the Earth is a bonbon with a creamy nougat center of petroleum. This is the abiotic oil theory, and it's complete nonsense, of course. But the more general delusion among the public, and indeed among all our leaders, is the idea that some hypothetical they are going to, quote, come up with something to help us run Walmart, Walt Disney World, etc. You know, some unknown, as yet unknown technological rescue remedy. And, you know, I put all of these ideas in a folder that I call techno-narcissism. We simply have too high we think too highly of our technological abilities, and we're probably not going to be rescued by technology. We're probably going to have to make other arrangements of a very down-to-earth kind. Next. You know, the quality of the conversation about our predicament is so poor, especially in the places where you'd expect that it would be better. For 3 years, I've gone to the Aspen Environment Forum, and every time you go there, you know, the cream of the environmental intelligentsia is there, and they're having conversations about, you know, how we're going to run all of the automobiles by other means. You know, when the issue of peak oil comes up, or of extreme car dependency and all of these related issues, the only thing that this group of people wants to talk about is, you know, how great it will be to have electric cars and hybrid cars and cars that run on algae secretions. They never want to talk about walkable neighborhoods. They never want to talk about rebuilding the transit system in America. And the quality of this conversation is really not worthy of this group of people. I saw a similar thing at Google a few years ago when I gave a talk, and it was a talk about energy, and during the question and comment period, there were no questions, just one kind of uniform comment. And the comment was, dude, we've got technology. And that showed me that this group of people working, and these were the senior executives and engineers at the leading high-tech corporate enterprise in America, did not know the difference between technology and energy. They thought they were interchangeable and substitutable for each other, that if you ran out of energy, you could just plug in technology. And that's simply not true. That's just another fantasy. And so the quality of these conversations and the places that they're taking place in are really disgracing our culture. We've got to do better. We've got to have a better conversation. Technology and energy are not the same thing. In fact, you're not going to run the technology without energy. Next. One of the features of what's going on is that the global economy is unwinding. Contrary to what Tom Friedman of the New York Times thinks and says and writes, the global economy is not a permanent installation of the human condition. The global economy was a set of transient economic relations between nations for special reasons at a special time in history, namely about 100 years of really cheap energy and about 50 years of relative peace between the great powers. These relations are now coming to an end as we enter a period of contesting over the remaining resources of the planet. And this is certain to generate friction and conflict, and especially to change the kinds of trade relations and manufacturing chain relations that we've had with other countries. It's already happening right now in the form of currency wars. But the action will move deeper into our economic relations. Next. One of the great, well, first of all, I think it's important to make this point that, you know, as globalism withers away and unwinds, I think that we're going to see that the economy of North America will become more internally focused than it is now. That doesn't mean we're going to be a wealthier nation or we're going to make more stuff. It just means that relatively more of the economic activity that we have will be generated from within North America. It also, I don't mean to give the idea that there will not be any international trade. I think that there certainly will be, but not like the gigantic volumes that we've had and in the way that we've done it, you know, with the 12,000-mile supply lines to the factories of China for Walmart and the warehouse on wheels, etc. So one of the great virtues of North America is that we have a tremendous, incredible inland waterway system, and that is one of the things that will be the basis of the economy in the future. By the way, this chart has left out a big part of that waterway system, which is the Hudson River, Champlain Canal, Erie Canal connection to the St. Lawrence River and the Great Lakes. And of course, the Great Lakes must be understood as America's vast freshwater Mediterranean Sea. So it's a greatly undervalued region of our nation right now. Next.
Jim, are you still there?
I'm here, yeah.
Oh, okay. I lost you for a second.
Well, I'm here. Can you change the slide?
Sure.
Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. There will be very large demographic shifts coming along, but I don't think that they're exactly what many of the experts and commentators have said. You know, people like Ed Glazer of Harvard, the economist who thinks that everything will move to the giant city of skyscrapers in the future and that everything will only get bigger. In fact, what I see happening is that as suburbia fails, and it will fail, you know, people are going to have to make other arrangements for where they're going to live. But the big cities are going to contract too. The big metroplex cities of America have attained a scale that is not consistent with the resource realities of the future or the capital realities of the future. They're going to have to get smaller. And the process is likely to be messy and disorderly and involve, you know, enormous losses of wealth and you know, people's notional ideas of the value of their real estate. And our cities will be lucky if they can contract in a coherent way around their old centers and their waterfronts. It remains to be seen how that will all work out. But I think we're going to also see some other surprises in terms of where people go. Next. We're lucky that the new urbanists have been around for 20 years because this group of professional designers and urban planners and architects and developers and municipal officials have already done the dirty work of diving into the dumpster of history and retrieving this tremendous wealth of principle and methodology and skill needed to assemble human habitats, and in particular places that are truly worth living in contrast to the suburban miasma that we've constructed over the last 60 years or so. Next. The housing bubble, of course, is, you know, the crash of the housing bubble is now a self-evident thing. It's been going on for years and no sign of it really ending. But, you know, still, despite all that, the people who brought us the last gasp, the great final fiesta of the suburban explosion in the early 21st century, all those people, the realtors and the production home builders and the mortgage originators and the, you know, all of those players are still kicking back, waiting for the, quote, bottom of the real estate market to come in with the idea that they're going to resume building more suburban stuff. And it's important to understand that we're done. The suburban project in America is over. You know, you may see some of the final twitchings out there. Those are generally things that received their permits 36 or 48 months ago. And from here on in, we're going to be living differently. So say goodbye to that. Next. This, of course, is the grand elaboration of that pattern, and there are tremendous tragic elements to it. The final fiesta of the suburban explosion, which occurred around the time that oil prices were getting real low in the mid to late 1990s, and they finally got as low as $11 a barrel. And of course, they're now in the 90s. But this was the behavior that we had then, and at the time, suburban construction became about 40% of all of the new jobs created, after the mid-1990s. And it was tragic, largely because of the essential nature of suburbia, which is that it is a living arrangement with no future. That's its essence. And so what we did in the last 20 years is build more stuff with no future. A very tragic thing. Next. So we got to get a new dream, especially a new dream of how we're going to live and how we're going to inhabit the terrain. Next. I think that we're going to be very surprised, and especially the younger generation is going to be very surprised to see that agriculture will come much closer to the center of economic life than it has in a long, long time. And in my little corner of the country, which is Washington County, New York, about 200 miles north of New York City and about 15 miles west of the Vermont border, we have an old agricultural landscape. For the last 100 years, it was devoted to dairy farming, which is pretty much faded away now. And my county is now being re-inhabited by people, young people, who are farming differently. They're running smaller scale farms. They're producing a much more varied range of crops. They're raising animals on not factory farming basis, but on a small organic level. And they're employing, even for physical labor, people who have surprisingly advanced education. So it doesn't mean that everybody with a college degree will have to pick beans in the bean field, but what it means is that this is really a period of sharp transition in our economic behavior. And the young people are beginning to recognize this, and some of the more adventurous ones are exploring, the margins of this economic activity. Next. I think that it's quite clear that the agribiz industrial farming process is probably coming to an end. We simply aren't going to have the petroleum and the petroleum-derived soil inputs and the herbicides and all that stuff, the diesel fuel to run agribiz the way it's been designed to run. And of course, there are many implications to this. One of them is we may need more animal power to run stuff again. We don't know how much. We don't know whether it's 9% or 39% or 79% more than we're doing now. But it's very likely that this will be part of the scene in the years ahead. So this is one thing that we can prepare for. There are going to be a lot of jobs and vocations attached to this kind of activity, and be prepared for it. Next slide, Ariel. I think a lot of the action demographically is going to move to the smaller cities and the small towns, and in particular the places that have a meaningful relationship with food production and generally agriculture. And these are places like the city pictured here, Troy, New York. These are places that are much better scaled to the energy realities of the future than Houston or Washington or New York or Atlanta, et cetera, et cetera. But oddly enough, in this picture that you see here, this is the very center, Monument Square, of this industrial city in the Hudson Valley. And almost every building in the picture is uninhabited, either at the ground floor or upstairs. And so these empty, depopulated cities are sitting there waiting to be repopulated and reactivated. And it's my view that they will be. Next. Oh, and by the way, notice that Troy, New York is another one of those cities that is on one of the great inland waterways of America, the Hudson River, Champlain Canal, St. Lawrence River seaway system. One of the great new urbanist design firms, Dwani and Platter-Zyber, otherwise known as DPZ, were the founders of the new urbanism movement. And they generated a lot of great documentation in the 20 years that this has been going on. And one of their primary visual tools is this thing called the transect, which shows very clearly that the traditional way to settle the landscape is to have density at the center and then, increasingly less dense behavior going to the edge, and then you have different kinds of a rural landscape. And what is missing in this idea of the transect is the vast nebulous zone of suburban sprawl that dominates the scene today. But we're going to be returning to a much more traditional way of living. Next. In America, public space comes mostly in the form of the street. We don't have the 1,000-year-old market plazas and cathedral squares that you have in Europe, for example. And when you dishonor the street by turning it into a national automobile slum, you're going to disrupt the civic life and the spiritual life of your society. The whole idea of creating a sense of place and a place that is memorable and worth caring about really depends on your ability to define that space with architecture and using the languages and patterns and vocabularies and syntaxes of the architecture of your culture. In the case of the USA, we used a lot of Greco-Roman architecture in the early days of our country to get across the idea that we were A, democratic in the way that the Greeks were, and B, a republic in the way that the Romans were. So we got this Greco-Roman architecture that expressed that. But it wasn't about style at all. It was about using the facades of the building to define space gracefully, especially public space. When you see something like a hotel portico, for example, that is a device of architecture and urban design. And it has a particular purpose, but not necessarily what you think. It's not a place of socialization primarily, although it can be. It's primarily a transition between the outside and the inside, between the condition of being in a public place and the condition of being inside and in a more private place. And the portico is a zone of transition. And the construction of public space is all about making graceful transitions between things. This, by the way, is the main street of Saratoga Springs, New York, where the city that I've lived in for about 30-odd years. Next. Instead of constructing public space in a meaningful way, we spent the last 70 years building parking lots. And we now have about 50,000 places all over America that are not worth caring about and not memorable, and places that have a very, very poor destiny. And, it has profound impacts on our national psychology. Mainly that if you create enough places that are not worth caring about, you'll have a society that's not worth caring about and a civilization that's not worth carrying forward into the future. And that is the unfortunate spiritual predicament that we've placed ourselves in with this behavior, which has tremendous repercussions. Next slide, please.
Actually, Jim, before we move to the next slide, I have a quick question about this particular slide. Do you know where this picture was taken?
Well, I actually don't remember. Why? Do you recognize it? Is it your hometown?
It is. It's my hometown. I grew up a couple blocks from there.
Where is it?
Rockford, Illinois.
Ah, well, you know, it could be anywhere except there are no palm trees in the picture, right?
Right, right. And I actually recognize that sign that says mall in blue. That's the Northtown Mall sign. So,
Well,
yeah.
you know, it probably is a sign that's been replicated and manufactured many times. So, you know, who knows? By the way, is that white car in the center of the picture, is that your car?
Thankfully, no.
Oh, okay.
All right. Okay, next slide.
Okay, next. One of the things the new urbanists did, one of their achievements, was that they demonstrated that you could actually build new places in new construction that would end up being places that were memorable and worth caring about. And this was really quite a thing, because for several generations, Americans have had the absolute conviction that nothing new would make their lives better in terms of construction. If anything, if they saw the guys with the yellow hard hats come out to a building lot or an empty, you know, cornfield, they assumed that it would be a disaster, and they would form a NIMBY organization and call the lawyers and start a lawsuit. And that shows how little confidence that Americans have in the whole process of land development. But the new urbanists proved that we could build new things that would be designed well, that would be wonderful places. So, you know, once again, we need to be grateful to them for doing that. Next. This is an older version of an outdoor public room. This is Monument Square from another angle in Troy, New York, about 30 miles south of where I am. Let's go to the next slide, because there's more to talk about. This is, you know, we look at this picture, and, it, you know, unlike the previous slide, it's full of people in this tiny little street. And this is obviously a place that people want to be. And you would assume immediately that it's Europe, because, you know, the signs appear to be in French, and the architecture appears to be somewhat European. But in fact, it's in North America. But it is in Canada. This is a street in the old town of Quebec. But, you know, what it demonstrates is that you can actually have wonderful places in North America if you follow a few principles and define space properly and build buildings with care. These are not special buildings, by the way. You know, they're not monumental, and they don't make grand statements, but they define this intimate space very well, and it ends up being a place that people feel good in. You know, it's people like space to be coherent. They like to know where it begins and ends. They like to feel like they're in a room that's like a living room, only it's outdoors. And the walls of the room, just like the walls in your living room, you know, are making a statement that they're graceful and interesting, and that they contain artifacts that inform you what culture you're in and where you are. Next. A square in Amsterdam, a wonderful public space. It's very emphatically an outdoor room. It's you know, an oblong space. The pedestrian realm that we're looking down is very clearly defined. There's an added layer of definition with the street trees that are absolutely evenly. They filter the sunlight, or maybe the drizzle sometimes, because Amsterdam is very drizzly, so that people will feel more comfortable sitting in these seats. And the umbrellas give an added layer of definition and protection from the elements. But what really makes this place work great is the edge. And what's on the edge is what's called, you know, in technical lingo, a permeable and active membrane, or edge. And by that we mean it's permeable. Things go in and out. Things pass through the wall. The beer comes in and out. The waitresses go in and out. The shoppers go into the shops, etc. And that activates the void in the center, which is also beautifully furnished. You know, unlike America, where we have a diversity complex, the Europeans have decided that there will be one kind of superior chair that is really comfortable, and they'll all get the same chair, and then they'll play on a level playing field, competing for customers. Notice that the walls of this outdoor room are not special, but they speak to the public in architectural rhythms and patterns that are reassuring and orderly and speak in the historical vocabulary of their culture. Next.
Actually, just a real quick aside, I've been doing a lot of reading and studying around permaculture, and I'm hoping to get my certification at some point. But you mentioned edge and this permeable barrier, and that's extremely important in the practice of permaculture, is creating that edge and creating these boundaries between, in that system, different ecosystems. So I just thought that was an interesting parallel.
Thank you. I go even further, actually, to say that they're not necessarily boundaries, they are transitions between things, as I said earlier. And it's important to understand the difference between a boundary and a transition, because transitions connect things. And that's what you're seeing in this next slide, is the failure of transitions. In this square in front of Boston City Hall, which has been a failure since it was first constructed in the 1960s. And it's such an unpleasant public place that even the winos don't hang around there. It's not good enough for them. It doesn't have enough quality for the winos. It does not have any active membrane around the edge, just a lot of blank walls, and these are government buildings, so the ground floors are just blank office walls, or concrete planters, or just plain, brick walls. And they just won't fix it, and it just persists year after year after year. Next. But this is really the general condition of America, and what you're seeing here mainly is a complete lack of definition of space, except by signage, which is very low quality and really kind of degrading, and kind of a spatial failure. And this is how most of America lives, and most of America is continually day after day degraded by these kinds of conditions. Next. And of course, you add to it this thing, which is that we design buildings that are the equivalent of clowns, and the whole idea is, the building is, what the building is saying is, is jumping up and down and saying, look at me, I'm a clown, buy my hamburger. The good news is we're done doing this because the suburban project is over. It had a tremendously degrading effect on our culture. We make jokes about it, and because it's so omnipresent in our everyday world, we treat it with irony. But one of the things we're going to discover about the decades ahead is that there was nothing really funny about all this stuff. We treated it with irony because we were stuck with it, and there was nothing else we could do about it except develop that protective, defensive attitude. But it's really very pernicious and destructive.
I think we've transitioned. We decided that'd be a good point to stop this for a couple of reasons. One, we're getting real close to our finish time here. We like to be very disciplined for that. We're very happy that you all come in and be with us for an hour of your day, and we're respectful of your time. We wanted to actually end by going and showing a little bit of Dr. Kunzler's website and show you where he is today. He has come a long way in 2 years, and I think we're going to put up on the screen in just a second here what his website looks like today, and we're going to talk about that, just show you a little bit of sort of where he's at and his mentality. Just it's kind of interesting to look and see how things have changed over the period of years, and so it's been a couple of years now, and so we're now seeing that he has an interesting perspective. He's got a podcast. I don't believe that he was doing this at all when we talked to him previously. So just be able to see a little bit. Here's Manhattan Gothic that he has published, and you can see a couple of the other things that he's done. The next 5 oil and gas trends and so on. And then I thought it was really interesting. Let's go up to the dashboard for his garden. It's kind of interesting, and just scroll down the page. You're going to see he's got a bunch of pictures. It's really interesting what he's done, and actually this happened. He was getting it started, and I think he talks about it even a little bit later in the video. And I'm kind of putting a little twig out for you, something to grab on. So scroll down the page here a little bit as I'm talking. You can see some of the pictures and some of the things that he did in his garden. I want you to go in and watch the rest of this webinar. And one of the ways you can do that is to join our site, which is our Nourish the Planet education site, which is free. And we'll send you some login information about that. We'll add it to the end of this video when we replay it. So you can look for that. We also have registrations for those of you that are on here today, and we can get that to you also. But here's some stuff that Dr. Kunzler was doing. You can see this was in the fall, and I think as we go farther down here, you're actually going to see it goes into the winter, and he'll talk about where he's describing, where he's gotten to in this first year that he did for his garden, and that was 2013. And it doesn't appear that there's an update for 2014 on his site, but I'm sure he's got some great stories to tell about what's happened with that. He's in New York, so that's we'll see him that. Anyway, again, we're really excited for all of you to be here today. Thank you so much for being with us. It is right on our hour for us to finish up. If you've got any questions, you might throw them out to us there on the chat right now. We can look and see if we can answer some of those for you. But I want to let you know that we'll be back again in 2 weeks for our next webinar. I believe it's 2 weeks. I always have to look and see if this is one of those months where there's an extra week. So we won't be on. No, I think it is accurate. We will be on the 4th of February for our next webinar, and I actually believe that we have our speaker booked for that. I'm not exactly sure who that is right now, but we have bookings all through the spring now. We always would like to get new names from you for other people that you might want to recommend for us to have on for our webinars. We enjoy being with you. We hope you enjoy what you get from us. Please tell your friends about this. Go to our Facebook pages. Read our blogs. We have some incredible writers. We're getting new writers all the time, and new information. We think we put out information that could be useful for you. Again, we want you to be economic. We want you to think about making the planet better and make a little bit of money doing it. Signing off from Northern Colorado, and this is Wayne Dorban and the whole crew here at C.E.E.D.